Don't make a sound. Lin Yu whispered the words without lowering his head. His fingers remained on the keyboard, moving steadily over a report that no one on the executive floor would read carefully unless something went wrong. Beneath the desk, pressed between a cardboard archive box and Lin Yu's worn leather shoes, Lin An hugged his small backpack to his chest and nodded with the solemn obedience of a child who had learned too early that silence could be a form of survival. Outside the narrow archive office, footsteps crossed the corridor in hurried waves. Someone from the administrative department was scolding an intern in a strained whisper. The elevator had stopped on the 36th floor 3 times within 10 minutes. That never happened unless a director had arrived, or unless someone from the highest floor had decided to descend without warning. Lin Yu knew the rhythm of this company the way exhausted people knew weather, not by forecast, but by pressure in the bones. The office was not truly an office. It was a glass-walled storage room, converted into a temporary workspace after the finance team complained about losing documents. There was no proper heating, no curtain, and no space for a child to hide except beneath the oversized desk that had been pushed against the wall. Every morning, Lin Yu arrived 40 minutes early, wiped the dust under it with wet tissues, laid down an old grey blanket, and taught Lin An which files he could touch and which cables could never be pulled. He had promised himself this arrangement would last only 3 days. 3 days until the daycare near the subway accepted partial payment. 3 days until his next salary came. 3 days until he found another solution that did not require his son to fold himself under a desk like an unwanted thing. It had now been 17 work days. Poverty did not break promises loudly. It simply made them impossible. Then watched as people blamed themselves for failing. Dad. Linen breathed from below, barely louder than paper sliding against paper. My leg is numb. Lin Yu's eyes flickered toward the glass door. Stretch it slowly. Don't hit the box. The child moved with heartbreaking care. His sneaker brushed Lin Yu's ankle, then immediately withdrew, as if even that contact might expose them. Lin Yu kept typing. His shoulders relaxed, his expression empty. His reflection in the dark computer screen looked younger than 26, only when he forgot to guard his face. Most days, he looked like someone who had been tired for a very long time and had chosen not to make it anyone else's problem. A message appeared in the company group chat. CEO inspection. All department heads prepare. Lin Yu's fingers stopped for half a second. A coldness spread from his fingertips to his wrists. It was not fear of authority alone. In the 6 years since he had entered and left places under borrowed calm, he had met many people with power. Most of them were loud with it. They enjoyed making others flinch. But Shen Mochen was different. The CEO of Asterion Holdings rarely raised his voice, rarely repeated an order, and almost never appeared in departments beneath the executive strategy floor. He did not need to make people afraid. His silence did that for him. Lin Yu had seen him only from a distance. Twice. Once in the lobby, surrounded by directors who leaned toward him without realizing it. Once at the annual meeting, standing beneath white lights with his black suit immaculate and his eyes unreadable. Both times, Lin Yu had lowered his head before recognition could become memory. He had thought the past would remain buried as long as he stayed small enough. A hand knocked once on the glass door. Lin Yu's pulse struck hard against his throat. Before he could respond, the door opened. A young manager from administration stepped in, face pale with professional panic. Lin Yu. Why are you still here? The CEO is checking the storage records. Move the outdated files to the back shelves immediately. And don't leave anything personal around. There are still 3 sets of quarterly invoices unsorted, Lin Yu said evenly. Then sort faster. The manager glanced around, eyes sharp but careless. People like him never looked downward unless they had dropped something. If Director Meng asks, tell him the archive discrepancies were from before your transfer. Don't be stupid and take responsibility. Lin Yu nodded. Understood. The manager left without closing the door properly. Lin Yu stood, moved the first stack of files with calm precision, then bent as if to retrieve a folder from the lower drawer. His voice dropped so low only the child could hear it. Anne, listen to me. No matter who comes in, don't come out unless I call you. Lin An's eyes were wide in the shadow beneath the desk. He had Lin Yu's soft mouth, but not his eyes. His eyes were darker, colder at the edges, with a strange clarity that often made strangers pause. When he was younger, aunties in the wet market had laughed and said he looked like a little prince, mistakenly born in an alley. Lin Yu never laughed with them. Every compliment had felt like a door being left open behind him. If they scold you, Lin An whispered, I can say I came by myself. Something in Lin Yu's chest twisted. He wanted to touch his son's hair, but there was no time. And tenderness was dangerous when panic needed both hands. No, you don't say anything. You let me handle it. The corridor quieted, not gradually, all at once. Lin Yu straightened. His hands held a file box against his abdomen. Through the glass, he saw several directors appear at the far end of the corridor. Their suits were dark, their postures tense, their voices trimmed down to respectful murmurs. At the center of them walked a man who made the corridor seem narrower simply by entering it. Shen Mochen was taller than Lin Yu remembered, or perhaps memory had made him distant enough to survive. The Alpha wore no visible sign of haste. His black coat was folded over one arm, his tie severe, his gaze moving over the department with a cold accuracy that stripped away excuses before they were spoken. He was not handsome in the gentle way people praised in magazines. His features were too sharp, his restraint too heavy. There was a kind of danger in him that did not come from temper. It came from discipline. Lin Yu lowered his eyes at the correct angle. The directors stopped outside the archive office. Why is this room occupied? Shen Mochen asked. The administrative manager rushed forward. President Shen, this is Lin Yu, temporary archive support. He's responsible for sorting the disputed finance records. Temporary Shen Mochen's gaze passed through the glass and settled on Lin Yu. How long? The manager faltered. Almost 3 months. That is not temporary. No one answered. Lin Yu held the file box in silence. The weight of it pressed against his ribs. Beneath the desk, there was no movement, but he could feel Lin An's fear like a second heartbeat in the room. Shen Mochen opened the glass door himself before anyone could do it for him. The faint scent of cedar and cold rain entered with him. Clean and controlled, the pheromone of a high-ranking alpha suppressed so thoroughly that only another body's instinct could recognize it. Lin Yu's knees almost weakened. 6 years had passed. He had forgotten many details because forgetting had been necessary. He had forgotten the pattern of the hotel carpet, the broken clasp of his own shirt, the taste of fever at the back of his throat, the voice that had asked him in the darkness whether he was afraid. But the body was cruel. It remembered what the mind had buried. For one terrible second, the archive room disappeared, and he was 20 years old again, trembling behind a locked door with someone else's warmth holding the world away. Then Shen Mochen looked at him, and the past collapsed back into dust. Lin Yu, the Alpha said, reading his name from the badge. You prepared the discrepancy summary. Yes. President Shen. Show me. Lin Yu placed the box on the desk. Careful not to let it touch the edge where a small hand might be hidden, he opened the folder and pointed to the annotated sections. His explanation was concise, accurate, and stripped of anything that could be mistaken for nervousness. Around them, The directors gradually stopped looking impatient. One of them even leaned closer. Competence was often invisible until powerful people accidentally noticed it. Shen Mochen listened without interrupting. That was worse than being questioned. His gaze did not stay only on the paper. It moved once to Lin Yu's sleeve, frayed at the cuff despite careful washing, once to the cheap thermos on the shelf, once to the faint crease in the blanket corner barely visible beneath the desk. Lin Yu turned a page to draw his attention back. A muffled cough broke the room. It was small, painfully small, the kind of sound a child made after trying with all his strength not to make one. Everyone froze. The administrative manager's face drained of color. What was that? Lin Yu's hand tightened around the folder until the paper bent. For 1 second. There were a dozen lies available to him. Old pipes. A phone vibration. Someone outside the window. None of them would survive Shen Mochen's eyes. The alpha had already lowered his gaze to the space beneath the desk. "Come out," Shen Mochen said. The words were not loud. They were not cruel. But they carried the weight of being obeyed. Lin Yu stepped forward instinctively, blocking the desk. "President Shen, I can explain." Shen Mochen looked at him. "Then explain." The room waited. Lin Yu heard the manager inhale sharply. Already preparing to distance himself from scandal, he heard the directors shifting, irritated at being present for something beneath their rank but too curious to leave. He heard his son breathing in the dark. "My son had nowhere to go today," Lin Yu said. His voice did not shake. "That was the only dignity he could afford. I brought him here without permission. It has nothing to do with the department. I will accept any penalty." The manager immediately said, "President Shen, I had no idea. This violates workplace safety regulations. I'll have him dismissed today." Lin Yu did not look at him. Dismissal was not the worst thing that could happen. Being seen was. A small hand appeared first, gripping the desk leg. Then linen crawled out from beneath the desk, his hair slightly messy, his cheeks pale from holding back coughs. He stood beside Lin Yu and bowed as Lin Yu had taught him when meeting elders. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't touch the company's things." No one spoke. The silence changed shape. Shen Mochen's expression remained controlled. But something in his eyes sharpened so suddenly that Lin Yu felt it like a blade drawn in a quiet room. The alpha was looking at Lin An's face. Not generally. Not with casual surprise at finding a child in an office, but with a focus that moved from the boy's brow to his eyes, from the line of his nose to the stubborn tension in his mouth. Lin An, frightened by the attention, stepped closer to Lin Yu. Shen Mochen crouched. The directors behind him looked as if they had seen a mountain bend. "What is your name?" he asked. Lin An looked up at Lin Yu first. Only after Lin Yu gave the smallest nod did he answer, "Lin An." "An," Shen Mochen repeated. The syllable left his mouth with no visible emotion. Yet the air seemed to tighten around it. "How old are you?" "5. Lin Yu's heart stopped. 5 was safe. 5 was the number on the household registration after he had delayed filing it. 5 was what neighbors knew. What the clinic records mostly implied. What Lin An himself had been taught to say, because 6 invited counting, and counting invited ruin. But Shen Mochen looked at the child's face as if numbers were irrelevant. "President Shen," Lin Yu interrupted. Too quickly. "He's ill. If there is punishment, I'll receive it after work. Please allow me to send him home first." Home. Shen Mochen stood slowly. Where is home during working hours? The question struck too deep. Lin Yu could answer with an address. But that was not what had been asked. There was no safe home during working hours. There was only the underside of a desk, a blanket washed thin, a child trained not to sneeze. The administrative manager tried to laugh. President Shen. People like this always have excuses. Single omega. Poor background. Unstable childcare. We should. Enough. The manager shut his mouth. Shen Mochen did not raise his voice. But the temperature of the room seemed to drop. His gaze remained on Lin Yu. For the first time, something like anger moved beneath his restraint. But it was not the simple anger Lin Yu expected from a CEO whose rules had been broken. It was colder, more complex, and directed at too many things to name. You hid a child under a desk. Shen Mochen said. Lin Yu lowered his eyes. Yes. How many days? Lin Yu said nothing. How many? 17. A director muttered under his breath. Someone else looked away. Embarrassed now that the scandal had acquired a shape too human to enjoy. Shen Mochen's jaw tightened, and no one noticed. No one answered that either. Lin Yu placed one hand lightly on Lin An's shoulder. It was not only comfort, it was a shield, a claim, a plea. He knew how this world worked. An omega who broke rules was irresponsible. An alpha who abandoned consequences was unfortunate. A poor parent who improvised survival was negligent. People with warm offices and private drivers always had clean words for those who lacked both. Lin An suddenly coughed again. This time, he could not suppress it. His small body folded forward, and Lin Yu immediately crouched, touching his forehead. Too warm. Warmer than in the morning. A thread of panic slipped through his control. Shen Mochen saw it. Call the company doctor, he ordered. Lin Yu looked up. No need. I can take him. I wasn't asking. The old instinct to resist rose in Lin Yu. Sharp and humiliating. He hated orders disguised as help. He hated needing the help anyway. But Lin An leaned against his arm, feverish and quiet. And pride became another luxury he could not afford. The directors were dismissed with a glance. The manager lingered, terrified, until Shen Mochen looked at him and said, Prepare an incident report. Include why an employee under your supervision had to hide a sick child for 17 days without anyone noticing. The man's face turned grey. Within minutes, the archive room emptied of everyone except the three of them. The corridor resumed its movement, but more quietly now, as if the entire floor had learned to breathe around the glass. Lin Yu lifted Lin An into the chair. The child clutched his backpack, eyes half lowered, refusing to cry in front of a stranger. Shen Mochen looked at that stubborn little face for a long time. Then his gaze moved to Lin Yu. Tomorrow morning, report to my office. Lin Yu's fingers curled. President Shen, if this is about dismissal, human resources can handle it. It is not. Then I don't understand. Shen Mochen picked up his coat from the back of the chair, but did not put it on. Instead, he laid it over Lin An's shoulders with a movement so controlled it almost looked impersonal. The coat swallowed the child's thin frame. Lin An blinked, startled by the warmth, and Lin Yu forgot to breathe. You will bring him, Shen Mochen said. Lin Yu's voice came out barely above a whisper. Why? For the first time since entering the archive room, Shen Mochen did not answer immediately. His eyes rested on Lin An, on the child's face, on the resemblance that had already become a silent accusation between the adults. When he finally spoke, his tone was calm enough to be terrifying. Because there are some mistakes, Shen Mochen said, that should not be allowed to continue simply because everyone pretends not to see them. You may wait here. President Shen will see you when he is available. The secretary's smile was trained to be polite enough that no one could accuse her of contempt. Lin Yu recognized the shape of it immediately. He had worn versions of that smile himself when facing creditors. landlords, nurses at public clinics, and neighbors who lowered their voices too late. He stood outside the CEO's private office with Lin An beside him, one hand resting lightly on the child's shoulder, and accepted the humiliation as if it were simply another item added to an already crowded morning. The executive floor was too quiet. Even the carpet seemed designed to swallow mistakes before they reached important ears. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city was bright with winter sunlight, all glass towers and pale roads. But inside Asterion Holdings' highest level, the air held a measured coldness. Lin An's fever had gone down after a restless night. Yet his small fingers still clung to the strap of his backpack. He looked up at the frosted glass doors, then at the adults pretending not to stare. "Dad," he whispered, "is this where important people live?" Lin Yu lowered his gaze. "They work here." Lin An considered that seriously. "Then where do they hide when they're tired?" The secretary's typing paused for half a second. Lin Yu's throat tightened. He wanted to tell his son that important people did not hide. They had rooms with locks, cars with tinted windows, assistants who blocked inconvenience at the door. Hiding was for people who had nowhere legitimate to exist. Instead, he touched Lin An's hair once, smoothing down a stubborn curl that refused to obey water or comb. "Don't ask too many questions." "I only asked one. One can already be too many." The child nodded, not because he understood, but because he trusted the sadness beneath the instruction. Behind the frosted glass, voices moved faintly. A meeting was ending. Lin Yu heard the low cadence of directors reporting, the scrape of chair legs, and then silence. When the doors opened, several senior managers stepped out with the same expression, careful neutrality over fresh unease. One of them recognized Lin Yu and glanced quickly at Lin An. His eyes widened before he looked away. By noon, the entire building would know that the Omega from the archive room had been summoned upstairs with his hidden child. Perhaps they already knew. Rumors traveled faster than elevators. The secretary stood. "Lin Yu. President Shen asks you to enter." Lin Yu took one step forward. Lin An followed automatically. But Lin Yu stopped and looked at the secretary. May he wait outside? Before she could answer, Shen Mochen's voice came from within. "Bring him in." There was no anger in the words. That made them harder to resist. The office was larger than Lin Yu expected and emptier than it should have been. No family photographs. No decorative clutter. No trophies displayed for visitors to admire. A black desk stood before the window, severe and polished. Shelves of legal and financial documents lined one wall. On a low table near the leather sofa, someone had placed a glass of warm water and a plate of plain biscuits. Lin Yu noticed them immediately because poverty trained the eye to measure what could be consumed, what could be taken, and what would later be counted against you. Shen Mochen stood beside the desk, reviewing a folder. He had removed his suit jacket, but the absence did not soften him. In the morning light, his expression looked almost carved. His gaze moved first to Lin Yu, then to Lin An, lingering a fraction longer than courtesy allowed. "You were late by 2 minutes," he said. Lin Yu lowered his eyes. The subway was delayed. "You could have called." "I didn't have your office number." Shen Mochen looked at him for a moment. The reply was neither defiant nor apologetic. It was factual, which somehow made it more difficult to challenge. He closed the folder and placed it on the desk. "From today onward, you will assist with the internal audit review on this floor." Lin Yu's hand tightened on Lin An's shoulder. "President Shen, I'm not qualified for executive audit work. You identified discrepancies missed by 2 department supervisors. That was file sorting. That was analysis. Shen Motion's tone ended the distinction. Your official transfer notice will be processed under workplace safety review until childcare arrangements are resolved. The child may stay in the side lounge during working hours. Lin Yu looked up then. It was a mistake. Shen Mochen's eyes were already waiting, dark and unreadable, as if he had expected precisely that moment of disbelief. Lin Yu had prepared himself for dismissal. Salary deduction, public criticism, perhaps even a report to human resources that would make future employment impossible. He had not prepared for a room being made available, for the shape of punishment to resemble shelter. No, Lin Yu said softly. The secretary outside had not closed the door fully. Her shadow shifted. Shen Mochen's brows moved slightly. No, I broke company rules. I'll accept the penalty, but I won't accept special treatment. It is not special treatment. Then what is it? A correction. Lin Yu almost laughed, but the sound died before reaching his mouth. Powerful people loved that word. Correction, adjustment, arrangement. They used clean language for things that rearranged other people's lives. He looked toward the side lounge, visible through an inner glass partition. It was small but warm, with a sofa, a table, and blinds that could be lowered. To anyone else, it might have looked generous. To Lin Yu, it looked like a cage with better lighting. I can find another solution, he said. You had 17 days. The words struck with quiet accuracy. Lin Yu's face lost a little color. Lin An sensed it and moved closer, small body pressing against his leg. Shen Mochen watched that movement, and something almost imperceptible changed in his expression. The child did not merely seek comfort. He positioned himself as if prepared to protect the adult. A 5-year-old should not have known how to stand between harm and the person who raised him. Lin An, Shen Mochen said, voice lowering slightly. There are biscuits on the table. You may eat them. Lin An looked at Lin Yu. That small glance pierced through the room more cleanly than any accusation could have. Shen Mochen saw it the habit of permission, the caution around gifts, the way the child waited for his father to decide whether kindness was safe. Lin Yu gave the faintest nod. Only then did Lin An walk to the table, pick up one biscuit with both hands, and sit on the edge of the sofa without letting his shoes touch the leather. Dad says I shouldn't drop crumbs, he explained quietly. Shen Mochen did not answer. His gaze returned to Lin Yu. How old is he? Lin Yu's back stiffened. 5. When was he born? In winter. That is not a date. It is the answer I'm willing to give. The air tightened. Outside. The secretary moved away from the door. Either out of discretion or fear, Lin Yu knew he had spoken too sharply. He also knew that if he yielded one precise detail, Shen Mochen would take the next, and the next, until the past had nowhere left to hide. 6 years of survival had been built on imprecision, an altered registration date, a rented room under another district, clinic visits paid in cash when possible, names left blank, questions answered with exhaustion until people stopped asking. Shen Mochen walked around the desk, stopping several steps away. He did not approach too closely, and that restraint unsettled Lin Yu more than intimidation would have. Who is his father? Lin Yu's voice became very calm. He doesn't have one. Children do not appear out of nothing. Some fathers are less useful than nothing. This time, something in Shen Mochen's eyes changed openly. It was not offense. If it had been, Lin Yu could have borne it. Offense belonged to pride. And pride had predictable edges. What appeared in Shen Mochen's gaze was older and colder. as if the sentence had touched a place he had kept sealed without knowing it was still alive. For a moment, the office was full of things. Neither of them had named a banquet 6 years ago. A locked hotel room. A morning when one person woke to blood tests and silence, while another disappeared before dawn. Lin An sneezed. The tension broke. Shen Mochen turned toward the child. "Are you still feverish?" "I'm fine," Lin An said quickly, then hesitated because lying badly seemed to trouble him. "A little fine." Lin Yu moved at once, touching his forehead. "It's lower than last night." "You took him to a clinic?" "Yes." "Which one?" Lin Yu did not answer. Shen Mochen understood the silence too easily. A clinic that did not ask many questions. A doctor paid in cash. A waiting room where people chose not to remember faces. His jaw tightened. But when he spoke, the anger was hidden beneath procedure. "The company doctor will examine him later." "No." Lin Yu. The name came without title this time. Lin Yu felt it more sharply than he should have. He stepped slightly in front of Lin An. "He's not an employee. He is not part of your company. Your audit or your correction." "No," Shen Mochen said. "He is a sick child who spent over 2 weeks under a desk while adults with salaries and offices failed to notice." Lin Yu's lips parted, but nothing came out. He had endured insults before. Careless ones. Sharp ones. Intimate ones. He had been called irresponsible, shameless, unlucky, stubborn, difficult. But Shen Mochen's sentence did not place all the guilt in his hands. That was why it hurt differently. It left no familiar wall for Lin Yu to lean against. If he was not the only person to blame, then the world was more complicated than survival allowed it to be. By mid-morning, the transfer notice had appeared in the internal system. By noon, the rumors had become elaborate. Lin Yu heard fragments when he went downstairs to retrieve his old files. The Omega had seduced someone powerful. The child had cried in front of the CEO. The CEO was furious. The CEO was strangely protective. The child looked familiar. Someone said the last sentence too softly, and another person told them to shut up. When Lin Yu returned to the executive floor, 2 employees near the pantry stopped talking. One smiled awkwardly. The other pretended to stir coffee that was no longer hot. Lin Yu walked past them without expression. Inside Shen Mochen's office, Lin An was sitting at the low table with a coloring book that had not been there earlier. A cup of warm milk stood beside him. He was not drinking it. Instead, he was examining an expensive fountain pen with careful fascination, hands folded behind his back as if afraid his fingers might act without permission. Shen Mochen stood near the window, speaking on the phone. His voice was low. Any further discussion involving the child's identity, appearance, or personal circumstances will be treated as a breach of confidentiality. Send the notice under my name. He ended the call before the person on the other side finished responding. Lin Yu remained at the doorway. "You don't need to do that." Shen Mochen turned. "They should not have done it first. That won't stop them from thinking. I don't manage thoughts. I manage consequences." Lin Yu looked away. He disliked the sentence. He disliked more that, for once, power had been pointed away from him rather than at him. Gratitude rose like something unwanted. He pressed it down. At 2 in the afternoon, Assistant Shu brought in a stack of personnel records. Lin Yu saw his own file among them. The beige folder looked thin, harmless, incomplete. Shen Mochen noticed the direction of his gaze and placed one hand over it without opening it. "You may take the audit files to the next room," he said. It was dismissal disguised as work. Lin Yu understood and obeyed because arguing would reveal fear. But through the half-closed glass partition, He saw Shen Mochen open the folder once he was gone. He saw the Alpha's face grow still as he read the employment gap from 6 years ago, the changed address, the delayed household registration for Lin An. He saw Assistant Shu place another sealed document on the desk and heard only one sentence clearly. The hotel surveillance archive was mostly erased. President Shen. But we recovered one still image. Lin Yu's fingers went cold around the files. He did not move. To move would be to confess he had heard. To remain was worse. In the main office, Shen Mochen stared at the printed image placed before him. It was grainy, black and white, taken from the service corridor of a private hotel 6 years earlier. The timestamp read 417 a.m. A young Omega stood near the elevator, hair damp with sweat, shirt collar pulled high. One hand braced against the wall as if walking required more strength than he possessed. His face was turned partly toward the camera. Lin Yu, younger, pallor, terrified. Shen Mochen's hand closed slowly around the edge of the paper. Memories he had distrusted for years returned in fragments heat under his skin. The taste of sedatives, a trembling voice telling him not to come closer. His own hand stopping at the last moment before touching a tear on someone's cheek. He had woken alone to doctors, family explanations, and a sealed report that called the incident an attempted setup. No one had mentioned an Omega leaving before dawn. No one had mentioned Lin Yu. Near evening, Lin An fell asleep on the sofa in the side lounge. One cheek pressed against his backpack. His small body had finally surrendered to warmth and safety he did not yet know how to trust. Lin Yu came in carrying revised audit notes and stopped when he saw Shen Mochen standing beside the sofa. The Alpha removed his coat and laid it over the child. The movement was careful, almost awkward, as though tenderness were an unfamiliar language, and he refused to mispronounce it loudly. Lin An stirred but did not wake. His fingers curled into the expensive fabric. Lin Yu watched from the doorway. For one dangerous second, the words rose in him. That night, you. He swallowed them until they cut. Shen Mochen looked up. Their eyes met across the sleeping child. Across 6 years of silence. Across a truth neither of them was ready to survive. On Shen Mochen's desk, beneath the edge of a closed folder, the old surveillance still remained visible, and for the first time, Lin Yu realized that the past had not stayed buried. It had only been waiting for someone powerful enough to dig. Were you at the Lanyu Hotel 6 years ago? Shen Mochen asked the question without looking up from the audit file, as if he were merely confirming a number in a ledger. Outside the glass wall of his office, evening had folded itself over the city, leaving only the reflection of lights and distant traffic against the windows. The executive floor had emptied, but Lin Yu remained standing before the desk with a stack of corrected documents in his arms. The old surveillance still burning in his memory like a photograph held too close to flame. His first instinct was not to deny it. Denial required surprise. And Lin Yu had been expecting this question since the moment he saw the file beneath Shen Mochen's hand. His second instinct was to ask how much Shen Mochen remembered. That was more dangerous. A person could survive being questioned. He could not survive revealing which wound still hurt when pressed. I don't remember every hotel I passed 6 years ago, Lin Yu said. Shen Mochen finally raised his eyes. Passed. Lin Yu kept his expression composed. I was poor then too. I delivered documents, cleaned private rooms, waited tables when agencies needed temporary staff. Hotels blur together. That night did not blur for me. The office became quiet enough that the hum of the ventilation seemed intrusive. Lin Yu's fingers tightened around the documents, but his face did not change. Shen Mochen watched him the way he watched financial fraud reports, not with impatience, but with the certainty that numbers always betrayed what people concealed. Yet, Lin Yu was not a number. He had spent years learning how to make his life unreadable. Then President Shen should speak to the people who arranged your night. Lin Yu replied, not to someone who was passing through. Something cold moved through Shen Mochen's eyes. It was not directed fully at him, and that made Lin Yu more unsettled than anger would have. The Alpha leaned back slightly, the city lights cutting a hard line along his jaw. You know I was arranged. Lin Yu regretted the sentence as soon as it left behind evidence. But regret was useless. He lowered his gaze. Everyone knew rumors about that banquet. Not everyone disappeared before dawn. The words landed softly. Lin Yu heard the accusation beneath them, but also something else, not quite blame. Not quite pleading. Shen Mochen was too controlled to plead. Men like him turned longing into interrogation because questions were safer than need. Before Lin Yu could answer, the side lounge door opened. Lin An stood there barefoot, one hand rubbing his eye. Shen Mochen's coat dragging from his shoulders like a cloak stolen from a much larger world. He had been asleep for nearly an hour. But some children woke whenever the air around their parent changed. Lin Yu turned at once. Why are you up? Lin An looked from him to Shen Mochen. Then back. I thought you left. The sentence was simple. It struck both adults in different places. Lin Yu went to him, crouched, and adjusted the coat before it slipped. I'm here. Shen Mochen watched the Omega's hand settle at the child's back, firm and gentle at once. There was no hesitation in that touch, no uncertainty. Whatever Lin Yu denied, he had never denied this child. A bitter feeling rose in Shen Mochen's chest, unfamiliar in its helplessness. He had authority over buildings, contracts, people who bowed before speaking. Yet he had no authority over the 5 years in which Lin An had learned to fear abandonment in his sleep. You can leave for today. Shen Mochen said. Lin Yu stood. The revised summary is not finished. It can wait. It usually can't. I said it can. The words were an order, but the tone had shifted. Lin Yu heard it and wished he had not. Pity was unbearable. Gentleness was worse. He gathered Lin An's backpack, folded the coat carefully, and placed it on the sofa rather than handing it back directly. Some distances had to be maintained by objects when the heart was too tired to build walls. At the elevator, Lin An looked back through the glass. Shen Mochen was still standing beside the desk, motionless beneath the white office lights, for reasons the child did not understand. The Alpha looked lonelier than important people were supposed to look. The next morning, Madame Shen arrived before 9. Her visit was announced through a ripple of silence before any secretary spoke her name. She was not old, but she had perfected the kind of elegance that made age-irrelevant pearl earrings. Grey silk suit, hair pinned without a strand misplaced. Her face held no open cruelty. That was what made her frightening. People who enjoyed harm could be resisted. People who believed harm was order often sounded reasonable while ruining lives. Shen Mochen was in a board call when she entered his office without waiting. Lin Yu was in the adjoining room, reviewing financial records with Assistant Xu. Lin An sat by the window with a picture book, carefully coloring within the lines. Madame Shen's gaze found the child first. The pencil stopped moving. Lin An did not know who she was, but some instincts did not require introduction. He sat straighter. So the rumors were not exaggerated, Madame Shen said. Assistant Xu's expression changed. Madame Shen. President Shen is in a meeting. May I ask you to wait? No. She looked toward Lin Yu. You are Lin Yu. Lin Yu stood. Yes. Her eyes moved over him with clinical restraint. Inexpensive shirt. Pale face. Wrists too thin. posture too steady for someone of his status. If she was disappointed by the lack of obvious shamelessness, she did not show it. "Come with me." Assistant Shu stepped forward. "Madam, President Shen instructed that Mr. Lin's work." "I am not speaking to you." Lin Yu glanced at Lin An. Then, at the closed office door, Shen Mochen's voice continued faintly from inside, low and distant. If Lin Yu refused, the confrontation would unfold in front of his son. If he obeyed, he might lose the only ground he had gained. He made the choice parents often made, not the safest one for himself, but the least frightening one for the child. "An, he said. "Stay with Uncle Shu." Lin An's mouth tightened. "I can go too." "No." The child looked at Madame Shen, then slowly lowered his pencil. "I'll wait." Madame Shen led Lin Yu to a small reception room at the end of the corridor. The curtains were open, and morning light poured over the polished table between them. She did not ask him to sit. Lin Yu remained standing. So did she. The performance of equality was unnecessary when both understood there was none. "I will be direct," she said. "Whatever relationship you believe you have with Mochen, end it. There is no relationship. Then leaving should be easy." Lin Yu's expression remained calm. "I work here. You hid a child under a desk for more than half a month. Do not insult me by pretending your employment is the central issue." Madame Shen placed a slim envelope on the table. "There is enough inside for you to leave the city. Settle your debts, and put the child in a proper school. In return, you resign quietly and stop appearing in front of my nephew." Lin Yu looked at the envelope but did not touch it. "You think he is bothered by me? I think powerful men sometimes mistake guilt for attachment. I think omegas with difficult lives sometimes mistake attention for rescue. Neither mistake should be allowed to grow." The words were not shouted. They were worse for being almost kind. Lin Yu's face went a little pale. Madame Shen watched it happen and misread nothing. She was sharp enough to know she had struck somewhere old. That, perhaps, was her true cruelty, not that she lacked empathy, but that she used it efficiently. "My son is not a tool," Lin Yu said. "Then stop placing him where he will be seen as one." Lin Yu looked up. Madame Shen's gaze was steady. "If that child has nothing to do with the Shen family, leaving protects him. If he does, leaving protects him even more. You may not understand what succession does to children, but I do. Blood invites knives long before it invites love." For the first time, Lin Yu heard something beneath her control that was not disdain. Fear. Not for him. Not even for Lin An as a person. Perhaps. But fear of a family machine that consumed weakness and called the remains duty. He folded the envelope once. Not to take it, but to close it from view. "I won't accept your money. Pride is expensive. So is selling a child's future." Madame Shen's expression cooled. "Be careful. Courts do not favor unstable guardians." The threat entered the room gently and sat down between them. Lin Yu felt his body go still. There it was. The word he had dreaded for years. Guardian. Stability. Suitability. Legal language built to sound neutral while measuring poverty as failure. He had never feared hunger the way he feared clean documents held by people with better lawyers. The reception room door opened before Madame Shen could continue. Shen Mochen stood there. No one had heard him approach. His face was unreadable, but the air around him had changed. For a controlled alpha, anger did not need volume. It changed the pressure in the room until breathing became a conscious act. "Aunt," he said, "you came early." Madame Shen turned with perfect composure. "And you came late." His gaze moved to the envelope under Lin Yu's hand, then to Lin Yu's face. The pause was brief. But Lin Yu wished it had not existed. He did not want Shen Mochen to see fear there. Fear invited either pity or possession, and he did not trust himself to survive either. "Leave him alone," Shen Mochen said. Madam Shen smiled faintly. "You have not even confirmed anything." "I said leave him alone." "Mochen. Sentiment is not strategy." "No," he said. "But using a child as leverage is not strategy either. It is cowardice dressed in family interest." The words cut cleanly. Madam Shen's smile faded at the edges. Lin Yu should have felt relief. Instead, something in him tightened further. Protection given in front of another powerful person was still power moving over his head. He had not asked to be defended. He had not been given the chance to defend himself. The difference mattered, even if no one else heard it. By afternoon, Lin An's fever returned. It began quietly. A flushed cheek. Slower answers. The little pencil slipping from his fingers. Lin Yu noticed before anyone else because parenthood made the body a second thermometer. He touched the child's forehead and felt heat bloom beneath his palm. "We're leaving," he said at once. Shen Mochen was coming out of a meeting when he saw Lin Yu lift Lin An into his arms. The boy's head rested against his father's shoulder. Eyes half closed. "What happened?" "Fever. I'll have the driver bring the car." "No need." "The subway." "Lin Yu." The name stopped him. Not because it was an order this time, but because Shen Mochen sounded almost afraid. Lin Yu looked at him. For one suspended moment. Neither spoke. Then Lin An coughed weakly against Lin Yu's collar, and pride lost again to necessity. The hospital smelled of disinfectant, wet wool coats, and vending machine coffee. Rain had begun outside, turning the emergency entrance into a blur of umbrellas and headlights. Shen Mochen carried Lin An from the car despite Lin Yu's first refusal. Not forcefully, but with a steadiness that left no room for delay. The child was too feverish to protest. His small hand curled unconsciously in Shen Mochen's shirt front. Lin Yu walked beside them, soaked at the shoulders, feeling as if the world had tilted. In the pediatric ward, forms appeared. Questions followed. Age, birth date, allergies, family history. Lin Yu answered what he could and evaded what he must. Shen Mochen stood slightly behind him, silent, watching the way Lin Yu's voice thinned whenever the doctor asked about paternal genetic conditions. When Lin An was finally taken inside for examination, Lin Yu remained outside the door, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles blanched. Shen Mochen stood a few steps away. He did not offer comfort. Perhaps he had learned enough to know Lin Yu would reject it. "After a long time," he said, "I will not take him from you." Lin Yu did not look at him. "You don't know what you will do." "I know." "No." Lin Yu's voice was very quiet. "You know what you think is right while standing in a hospital corridor. That is not the same as knowing what you will choose when your family, your lawyers, your shareholders, and your bloodline are all standing behind you." Shen Mochen had no immediate answer. That silence hurt because it was honest. The examination room door opened near midnight. The doctor stepped out, lowering his voice when he saw Shen Mochen. "The fever is manageable. We'll observe him for a few hours. But there is something unusual in his preliminary alpha marker profile." Lin Yu went rigid. The doctor glanced between them. Unaware of the full shape of the disaster his words were building. "President Shen, I reviewed the emergency genetic sensitivity panel because of his reaction pattern. His pheromone structure is extremely rare. In fact, it is remarkably similar to the Shen family profile we have on confidential medical record." Rain struck the window at the end of the corridor. Shen Mochen did not move. Lin Yu closed his eyes for one brief second, as if the world had finally placed a hand on the door he had spent years holding shut. The doctor realized too late that he had spoken into a silence with teeth. Lin Yu opened his eyes. His face had gone almost bloodless, but his voice, when it came, was steady enough to frighten anyone who knew what steadiness cost him. "Doctor, my son has a fever. If there is no immediate danger, please treat the fever first." The doctor looked uncomfortable. Of course, the fever is responding to medication. He should rest here until morning. As for the marker profile, it is only preliminary. A full genetic comparison would be needed to confirm. "No comparison is needed," Lin Yu said. Shen Mochen did not look at the doctor. He was looking at Lin Yu, but not in accusation. That was the worst part. If there had been anger, Lin Yu could have held it at arm's length. Anger had shape. This expression had none. It was something heavier. Something that seemed to be falling through 6 years of emptiness and finding no flaw. The doctor excused himself with professional haste. Rain dragged silver lines down the corridor window. The hospital lights made everyone look tired. Honest. Less able to pretend. Lin Yu stood beside the examination room door, one hand resting against the wall. Shen Mochen remained a few steps away. As if distance were the only thing preventing him from reaching for an answer he had no right to demand. "Lin Yu," he said. "No. I haven't asked anything. You will." Shen Mochen's jaw tightened. "Then answer before I do?" Lin Yu turned to him. His eyes were red at the edges, though not from crying. Some questions are not asked because people want truth. They are asked because people have already decided what they deserve to take. The sentence struck cleanly. Shen Mochen's hand closed at his side, inside the ward. Lin An murmured faintly in his sleep. Lin Yu went in without waiting for permission. Shen Mochen stayed outside until the child's breathing settled into the slow rhythm of medicated rest. By dawn, the fever had lowered. Lin Yu refused the private room Shen Mochen arranged. He also refused the driver, the follow-up appointment, and the breakfast assistant Shu delivered with careful eyes. Each refusal was quiet. None was dramatic. That made them harder to oppose. He signed the discharge papers with the exhausted precision of someone protecting the last piece of land under his feet. Shen Mochen watched him from across the billing counter. "Let me pay." "It's already paid." "With what?" Lin Yu's pen paused. "Money." The answer made Shen Mochen regret the question. Lin Yu had paid with a credit card that would charge interest he could not afford. With next week's groceries. With the careful arithmetic of someone who knew exactly how much survival cost. To ask was to expose it. To expose it was already a kind of cruelty. Shen Mochen took one step back. "I didn't mean—" "You rarely do," Lin Yu said, signing the last line. "That doesn't change what happens." The words stayed with Shen Mochen long after Lin Yu left the hospital carrying Lin An. Assistant Su stood beside the car, waiting for instruction. Shen Mochen looked at the rain-dark street. At the bus stop where Lin Yu stood beneath a broken shelter, shielding the child with his own coat while refusing to turn around. "Find out who handled the medical report from 6 years ago," Shen Mochen said, at last. Assistant Shu lowered his voice. "President Shen, should we also arrange a formal paternity test?" The obvious answer waited between them. It was efficient, legal, irrefutably. It was also an invasion. He had spent his life using documents to pin down betrayal before it could move. Now a document might tell him whether he had a son, whether an Omega had hidden his blood for years, whether he himself had slept through the beginning of another person's ruin. "Prepare it," he said. The moment the words left him, something inside him recoiled. Assistant Shu heard only the order. He bowed and went to make it real. That was the problem with power. Regret always arrived after obedience had already begun. 3 days passed with unbearable politeness. Lin Yu continued reporting to the executive floor. Shen Mochen did not mention the hospital corridor. Lin An stayed in the side lounge. No longer under a desk, but not free from hiding either. On the low table, new picture books appeared. A small humidifier appeared the next morning. Then, a blanket, softer than the grey one Lin Yu washed at home by hand. Lin Yu used none of them at first. On the 4th day, he found Lin An asleep with the new blanket pulled only over his feet, as if accepting half a gift were less dangerous than accepting the whole thing. Shen Mochen saw it too. From the doorway, neither adult spoke. The child's caution accused them both. Madame Shen's second move came not through the office, but through the school. Lin An attended a small private kindergarten on a subsidized placement arranged after months of paperwork. That afternoon, when Lin Yu arrived to pick up his son, the teacher's smile trembled. Mr. Lin. An was already picked up. For 1 second, Lin Yu did not understand the sentence. It entered his ears as language and reached his mind as noise. What did you say? A woman came with authorization documents. She said she was from the family. There was a copy of your identification and... My son has no family authorized to pick him up except me. The teacher's face crumpled. The director approved it. She seemed very official. And Anne didn't want to go. But she said you had asked. Lin Yu was already running. He called Lin An's small watch phone. No answer. He called again. The line rang until it cut off. Parents passed him with children. Umbrellas. Snack bags. Ordinary complaints about homework and traffic. The world continued with insulting normality, while Lin Yu's body became a single point of terror. His next call was not to the police. He hated that. He hated more that his fingers knew whose number to choose. Shen Mochen answered on the second ring. Lin Yu. Someone took An. There was no wasted breath. Where are you? At school. They said a woman came with documents. She took him. He didn't want to go. I'm coming. A pause. Brief and controlled. Listen to me. Stay where there are cameras. Do not follow anyone alone. Send me the school address. I can't stay here. You can, because if they wanted the child hidden, they would not use a school gate. This is pressure, not disappearance. His voice sharpened with the effort of holding panic behind glass. Lin Yu. Breathe. The command should have angered him. Instead, his lungs obeyed before his pride could interfere. Shen Mochen arrived in 12 minutes. His car stopped illegally at the school entrance. He stepped out before the driver could open the door. Black coat unfastened. Expression stripped of all corporate polish. Lin Yu had never seen him look less like a CEO. He looked like a man who had arrived too late once before and would destroy the road rather than repeat it. Assistant Shu emerged from the second car with 2 security staff. Within minutes, the school director was pale and stammering in the reception office. Shen Mochen placed 1 document on the desk, a gate still showing Madame Shen's assistant holding Lin An by the wrist. Name. Chen Mochen said. The director trembled. She said she was Miss Chiao from the Shen household. Lin Yu closed his eyes. Shen Mochen turned toward Assistant Shu. Track the vehicle. Already done. It entered the East Service Road near Riverside Club. Shen Mochen's face went cold. Riverside Club was private property under the Shen family's old holdings. Not a place to harm a child. A place to stage a lesson. Lin Yu turned to leave. But Shen Mochen caught his wrist not hard. Not painfully, but with instinctive speed. Lin Yu looked down at the hand. Shen Mochen released him at once. "I'm going with you," Lin Yu said. "I know." The answer startled him. The drive to Riverside Club lasted 21 minutes. Lin Yu counted every one because not counting would have meant imagining. Shen Mochen sat beside him, making calls in a voice so quiet it was more frightening than shouting. He froze the club exits. He ordered the vehicle stopped. He told legal to prepare charges. He did not once say, "my son." Yet the unsaid phrase filled the car until Lin Yu could hardly breathe. They found Lin An in a private tea room, sitting rigidly on a carved wooden chair too large for him. Madame Shen's assistant stood nearby, speaking softly about good schools, proper family, and how children should not suffer because adults were stubborn. Lin An's eyes were dry. But when he saw Lin Yu, his mouth trembled for the first time. "Dad." Lin Yu crossed the room and pulled him into his arms. The child's composure broke silently. He simply clung so hard that his fingers dug into Lin Yu's coat. Shen Mochen entered behind them. Miss Chow turned pale. "President Shen, Madam only wanted. You touched a child without his guardian's consent." "I had authorization from, not from his guardian." The room fell silent. Lin Yu looked up. Shen Mochen had not said mother, father, family, or blood. He had said guardian. He had placed the word where it belonged. In Lin Yu's hands. In front of everyone. Miss Chow tried again. "President Shen, the madam is concerned about the Shen bloodline." Shen Mochen's gaze moved to her face. "You will leave the Shen household today. The school director will receive a legal notice by morning. Anyone who participated will explain themselves to the police. You would make this public." "No," he said. "You did." Lin Yu carried Lin An outside before his knees could fail. In the corridor, old paintings watched from the walls with generations of indifferent faces. Shen Mochen followed but stopped at a careful distance. At the entrance, rain had started again. Lin An was wrapped in Lin Yu's arms, exhausted, his face hidden. Lin Yu stood beneath the awning and looked at Shen Mochen across the grey curtain of weather. The terror had not left him. It had changed into something sharper. "If he is yours," Lin Yu asked, "will you take him from me?" Shen Mochen's face went still. There were answers a better man would have given immediately. "No. Never. I swear." Shen Mochen knew them all. He also knew the weight of his family, the legal machinery already turning in the dark. The blood claim that would become a weapon whether he held it or not. He wanted to promise before thinking. He wanted, shamefully, to say mine. His silence lasted only a few seconds. It was enough. Lin Yu gave a small nod, as if something bitter had been confirmed. "I understand." Lin Yu. "No, you don't." That night, after Lin Yu took Lin An home by taxi paid for with Shen Mochen's cash that he did not know had been slipped to the driver, Shen Mochen returned to his office alone. The city outside was black with rain. On his desk lay an envelope from the private laboratory, delivered 2 hours earlier. Assistant Shu stood near the door, a silent. Shen Mochen opened the envelope. The report was brief, clinical, merciless. Probability of biological paternity, 99. 100%. For a long time, Shen Mochen did not move. The paper trembled once between his fingers, so slightly that no one else would have noticed. A son. Lin Yu's son. His son, and somewhere in the city, the Omega who had hidden that child beneath a desk was already learning how to disappear again. The morning after the paternity report arrived, Shen Mochen did not summon Lin Yu. That was the first mercy, and perhaps the first mistake. He remained in his office before sunrise. the city still grey beneath the windows. The report lying open on his desk like a verdict that had learned how to breathe. Probability of biological paternity 99. 9,999%. The numbers were precise, almost elegant, and completely useless against the human weight of what they meant. A child had existed in hunger, fever, school gates, and the dark under a desk while he had existed in boardrooms, believing his loneliness was an injury done only to himself. Assistant Shu entered quietly with coffee and found the cup from last night, untouched. "President Shen," he said carefully. "Legal is asking whether to prepare documentation for formal recognition." Shen Mochen looked at the report. His eyes were dry. That was the cruel thing about certain kinds of grief. They did not make a person look broken. They made him look efficient. "Prepare nothing regarding custody without my approval." Assistant Shu paused. "And regarding the child's identity, seal it." "Yes." No one contacts Lin Yu. No one contacts the school. No one contacts the household registration office. Shen Mochen closed the report, but his hand remained on it. "If my aunt moves first, I want to know before her shadow reaches them." Assistant Shu understood the order and bowed. He did not ask whether President Shen intended to tell Lin Yu. Some questions were too personal even for those paid to stand near power. Yet when he left, he glanced once at the closed door of the side lounge, where Lin An usually sat with his picture books. The room was empty. For the first time in days, the executive floor felt too quiet. Lin Yu arrived at 8:47 with Lin An beside him. He looked exactly as he always did, pale, neat, composed, holding a cloth lunch bag in one hand and his son's backpack in the other. Only someone watching too closely would notice that he had not slept, that his collar was buttoned higher than usual, that his gaze avoided the main office door as if eye contact itself might trigger disaster. Shen Mochen saw all of it through the glass partition and did not move. He had imagined this moment during the night. Not a confession, he had forfeited the right to demand that. Not forgiveness, he had no language for asking. Only the beginning of truth. Perhaps a sentence placed carefully between them, "I know. I should have known. Tell me what happened. Not because I deserve it, but because you should no longer have to carry it alone." When Lin Yu looked up and found him watching, the sentence died. There was too much fear in the Omega's eyes. Not surprise, not guilt. Fear. Shen Mochen had seen people fear losing wealth. Position. Evidence. Reputation. Lin Yu feared losing a living child. That kind of fear had no vanity in it. It made a person quiet. It made him obedient until the exact second he ran. At noon, Shen Mochen was called into an emergency board meeting arranged, unsurprisingly, through Madame Shen's old allies. The meeting lasted 1 hour and 17 minutes. Every minute felt like leaving a door open in a storm. When he returned, Lin Yu was not at his desk. Lin An was not in the lounge. For one suspended breath, Shen Mochen thought the fear had already come true. Then he saw Lin Yu in the inner file room, standing beside the copier with a folder in his hands. The folder was from legal, marked confidential. Assistant Shu had left it under the audit materials by mistake, or perhaps not by mistake, in families like the Shen household. Paper had many ways of arriving where knives could not. Lin Yu did not look up when Shen Mochen entered. On the top page were 3 lines clear enough to destroy trust. Paternity confirmation received. Potential custody exposure high. Recommended strategy pending biological father's instruction. There were other words beneath, more cautious and technical. But Lin Yu had stopped reading after those. A person did not need the whole blade to know he had been cut. Shen Mochen felt the blood leave his hands. Lin Yu. Was this why you brought us upstairs? No. Was this why you covered him with your coat? Gave him books. Warned others not to talk. Lin Yu's voice remained low. That made each word worse. To make sure he stayed close enough until the paperwork was ready. No. Shen Mochen took a step forward, then stopped when Lin Yu flinched. The movement was small. It reached him like a slap. Listen to me. I ordered them not to file anything. I ordered them to seal it. After the test, the room had no answer. Lin Yu smiled then. Barely. It was not bitterness exactly. It was the exhausted expression of someone seeing the shape of a trap he had once hoped might be shelter. You tested him. Shen Mochen's throat tightened. I had to know. No. Lin Yu's fingers pressed into the folder until the paper bent. You wanted to know in a way that didn't require asking me. There's a difference. The sentence opened something in Shen Mochen that no anger could defend. He had thought regret was enough to make him different from his family. He had thought not using the result yet meant he had not crossed the final line. But Lin Yu stood before him with the proof in his hands. And Shen Mochen understood with terrible clarity that violation did not begin only when power acted publicly. Sometimes it began when one person decided another person's fear was an obstacle to be managed. I was wrong, he said. Lin Yu looked at him. For a moment. The calm nearly broke. That doesn't give me back the years when I had to be right every day just to keep him. Shen Mochen could not speak. Outside the file room, Lin An's small footsteps approached. He must have woken from his nap and come looking for his father. Lin Yu turned at once, folding the folder shut with shaking precision before the child entered. Dad Lin An looked between them. His eyes were still sleepy, but his body sensed danger before his mind named it. Are we going home? Lin Yu placed the folder on the copier. Yes. Shen Mochen stepped toward the door. Let me explain first. Not in front of him. Then later, Lin Yu lifted Lin An's backpack. His hand did not tremble now. That frightened Shen Mochen more. There may not be a later. The rain began before they reached the lobby. It struck the glass canopy in hard silver lines, turning the company entrance into a blurred stage where drivers waited and employees hurried out with umbrellas. Lin Yu did not have one. He pulled his coat over Lin An's head and walked into the rain before Shen Mochen's security could react. Shen Mochen followed as far as the steps. Lin Yu. People turned. No one had ever heard the CEO call anyone's name like that. Lin Yu stopped, but did not turn around. Lin An was in his arms. Small face hidden against his shoulder. Backpack bouncing against Lin Yu's side. Rain soaked through the Omega's shirt almost instantly. His back looked too thin beneath the darkening fabric, but unyielding in a way no force could bend without breaking. If you follow us, Lin Yu said, voice nearly lost beneath the rain, then everything I feared about you is true. Shen Mochen stopped. That was the first time he chose not to move. It felt like tearing out something vital and calling the wound restraint. Lin Yu disappeared into the rain beyond the gate. He did not return to the apartment registered under his name. Shen Mochen knew because security checked from a distance and reported only what they were allowed to report lights off. No movement. No forced entry. He did not send anyone inside. He did not freeze bank cards, trace phone signals, pressure friends, or use the machinery waiting at his fingertips. Each unused method became a punishment. Each restraint became a confession no one heard. By midnight, Assistant Xu found the first clue. President Shen. There is an old contact in Lin Yu's emergency file. A man named He Zian, former clinic volunteer, now runs a small bookstore near the West District. He helped with Lin An's kindergarten application years ago. Shen Mochen stood by the window, looking down at the city's wet lights. Do not approach him. Assistant Xu hesitated. If Mr. Lin is there, then he went there because he believed it was safer than me. The words cost him something visible. Assistant Shu lowered his head. Across the city, behind the closed shutters of a second-hand bookstore, Lin Yu sat on the floor of a narrow upstairs room while Lin An slept beneath a patched quilt. Ziyan placed a cup of ginger tea beside him and said nothing for a while. He had the patient silence of someone who had once seen Lin Yu at his worst and never used it as ownership. He knows, Ziyan asked at last. Lin Yu looked at the sleeping child. Yes. And he tested him. Ziyan closed his eyes briefly. Without asking you? Lin Yu laughed once. No sound held less humor. Would asking have changed the answer? It would have changed what kind of man he chose to be. The sentence stayed in the room. Lin Yu wrapped both hands around the cup. The warmth hurt his cold fingers. I thought I could handle being poor. I thought if I worked enough, hid enough, lowered my head enough, there would be a line they couldn't cross because An was mine. But blood, his voice thinned, blood gives powerful people a door. Ziyan sat across from him. And you, what about me? You gave him a life. That is not a wall made of paper. Lin Yu did not answer. He was too tired for encouragement that could not stand in court. Near dawn, Lin An woke and found his father sitting by the window. The rain had stopped, leaving the glass fogged at the edges. The child climbed quietly into Lin Yu's lap, still warm from sleep. Did Uncle Shen do something wrong, he asked. Lin Yu's arms tightened around him. Adults make mistakes. Big mistakes. Yes. Lin An thought about that for a long moment. Is it because they don't know how to say they're lonely? Lin Yu closed his eyes. The question was too gentle to survive. He pressed his face against his son's hair and did not cry loudly. Lin An pretended not to notice. Because children who grew up beside sorrow learned the mercy of looking away. At 9 in the morning, Madam Shen's lawyer filed an emergency custody petition. The language was elegant, restrained, and devastating. It cited workplace concealment, financial instability, unauthorized relocation, medical risk, and emotional unsuitability. It did not accuse Lin Yu of cruelty. It did not need to. It painted poverty as negligence and fear as instability. It referred to Lin An as a minor with confirmed biological ties to the Shen family. When the notice reached Shen Mochen's desk, he read it once. Then he stood so abruptly that the chair struck the floor behind him. For the first time in years, everyone outside the CEO's office heard something break. By 10 o'clock, the Shen family's private legal team had already prepared victory in 3 different tones. Each version treated Lin Yu as a problem to be managed. One sounded merciful, one sounded urgent, and one sounded almost gentle while removing him from his son's future. All 3 lay before Shen Mochen in the conference room. Madam Shen sat across from him with 2 lawyers and an old family director. The room smelled faintly of tea, leather folders, and inherited authority. Shen Mochen did not sit. One chair lay overturned behind him from his entrance minutes earlier. His hand rested flat over Lin An's name, as if shielding the child from the language trying to possess him. "Withdraw it," he said. Madam Shen's expression did not move. "You have not read the supporting evidence." "I read enough." The child was hidden in a workplace, taken to unregistered clinics, and removed from his residence after genetic confirmation. Every point supports emergency intervention. Every point supports the fact that he was afraid. Fear does not qualify a person to raise an heir. "No," Shen Mochen said. "Love does." The family director frowned. "Mochen, this is not a romantic matter. If the boy is your son, the board will demand clarity. Your aunt is trying to prevent scandal before others weaponize it." Shen Mochen finally looked at him. By kidnapping a child from school. The room froze. Madame Shen's fingers tightened around her teacup. Not enough for others to notice, but enough for Shen Mochen. Her calm had always been armor. Today, he could hear the metal beneath it. "I did not instruct anyone to frighten him," she said. "You instructed people to act without his guardian's consent." His guardian concealed his identity from his biological father. And his biological father, Shen Mochen said, each word deliberate, failed to know he existed. No one answered. Assistant Shu entered quietly and placed another file at Shen Mochen's side. The hospital record from 6 years ago. The suppressant overdose was reported internally. But the secondary omega distress marker was omitted from the summary given to you. Madame Shen's face changed at last. Shen Mochen opened the scanned record. One line sat near the bottom. Nearly buried beneath medical terms and signatures, unidentified omega, likely present at scene, further inquiry advised. Beneath it was a note in another hand, no need to pursue. No need. 2 words had become 6 years of hunger under fluorescent lights. A child beneath a desk. An omega learning to flinch at kindness. Shen Mochen closed the file. "I will make a statement," he said. Madame Shen stood. "Absolutely not." He looked at her not as a nephew trained inside family order, but as a man standing at the edge of the damage that order had made. "You wanted clarity, not self-destruction. Then you should have left him alone." At 11:30, Asterion Holdings issued an internal notice under Shen Mochen's name. It was brief, colder than gossip could survive, and impossible to misread. Lin An was not to be discussed. Photographed, followed, approached, or identified by any employee, partner, or affiliated family representative. Lin Yu was recognized as the child's sole legal guardian. Any attempt to contact his school, landlord, clinic, or associates without Lin Yu's written consent would be treated as harassment and pursued legally. At noon, Shen Mochen convened the senior board. By noon 15, every person in the room understood that he had chosen an omega's legal dignity over the easy claim of blood. Madame Shen's faction asked about reputational risk, guilt, and investor confidence. Shen Mochen listened until the last question faded. Then he said, "The risk to this company is not that a child exists. The risk is that anyone here believes a frightened parent and a 5-year-old boy are acceptable collateral in a family dispute." No one spoke after that. News of the notice reached the West District by evening. Not through official channels. It came through He Ziyan's old classmate in Human Resources, who sent only a screenshot with one line, "Your friend should see this." Lin Yu read it twice in the bookstore's back room. Lin An was downstairs helping He Ziyan arrange second-hand picture books by color instead of topic. His small voice drifted up occasionally, serious and soft, asking whether blue books felt lonely beside red ones. The sound should have comforted Lin Yu. Instead, it made the phone tremble slightly in his hand. He had expected pursuit. He had prepared for threats, legal pressure, maybe a car waiting outside the bookstore by morning. He had not prepared for Shen Mochen to use his name and authority to say, publicly and unmistakably, that Lin An belonged first to the person who had raised him. He Ziyan stood near the doorway. What did he do? Lin Yu passed him the phone. After reading, He Ziyan was silent for a long moment. That will cost him. Lin Yu looked down at his own hands. He has enough to pay. Not all costs are money. The words found him too easily. He wanted the world to remain simple enough that Shen Mochen could be filed under danger and locked away. But the notice did not fit inside that certainty. A man who intended to take Lin An would not have written this. A man protecting his own claim would have avoided naming Lin Yu's rights so clearly. A man trying to repair harm might. Repair was not forgiveness. It did not erase the test. The silence. The years. The morning Lin Yu had woken alone in a cheap clinic with his body aching and no one to accuse. But repair created a crack in the sealed room of fear. Through that crack, something painful and unwanted entered. Possibility. That night, after Lin An fell asleep between stacks of unsold books, Lin Yu called Shen Mochen. The line connected almost immediately. Neither spoke. The silence carried rain. Hospital corridors. A glass office. A coat over a sleeping child. A file marked confidential. It carried the old hotel room. Neither of them had learned how to enter in daylight. Finally, Shen Mochen said, "Are you safe?" Lin Yu looked at the sleeping child. "For now. I won't ask where you are. You already know." "Yes." "Then why haven't you come?" A pause. Shen Mochen's breath moved faintly through the receiver. "Because you left to get away from me." Lin Yu closed his eyes. That answer hurt because it did not defend itself. I saw the notice. It should have been unnecessary. But it wasn't. No. The honesty sat between them, rough and bare. Lin Yu found he could not hate it. "Why did you do it?" "Because if I used the truth to take him, then I would become the reason you were right to run." Lin Yu's throat closed. "You still tested him," he said. "Yes." "You still didn't ask me." "Yes." "You still let me find out through documents." Shen Mochen's voice became lower. "Yes." Lin Yu waited for explanation, for justification, for the polished logic of a man trained to make every decision seem inevitable. None came. The absence unsettled him more than argument. "I was wrong." Shen Mochen said, "I can tell you why I did it. But reasons are not absolution. I won't use them that way." Lin Yu pressed his fingers to his eyes. "And what do you want now?" "To make sure my aunt cannot touch you. To make sure the school cannot hand Lin An to a stranger again. To make sure the medical records from 6 years ago are corrected." A pause. "And to become someone Lin An does not have to hide from." Someone. 2 days later, Lin Yu agreed to meet in a public park near the bookstore. The morning was cold but clear. Bare branches scratched lines across a pale sky, and the lake held pieces of sunlight like broken glass. Lin An wore a knitted hat too large for him and walked beside Lin Yu with both hands tucked into his sleeves. When he saw Shen Mochen waiting near the stone bridge, he slowed but did not hide. Shen Mochen wore a dark coat and no entourage. No driver standing nearby. No assistant with papers. No security visible at the edge of sight. For once, he had arrived as only himself, which made him seem both less powerful and more difficult to face. Lin An looked up at Lin Yu. "Should I say hello?" "If you want to." The child considered. Then he stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Good morning." "Uncle Shen." Something passed through Shen Mochen's face. Too quick to name. "Good morning." Lin An. He did not correct the title. Lin Yu noticed. They walked along the lake without deciding to. Lin An moved between them at first. Then slightly ahead when a stray cat appeared near the bushes. Shen Mochen kept his hands visible. His pace measured to the child's shorter steps. He did not ask to hold him. He did not ask whether Lin An remembered the school incident or the office lounge. He answered when spoken to and remained silent when silence was safer. After a while, Lin An crouched beside the cat and whispered negotiations involving half a biscuit. Lin Yu and Shen Mochen stood several steps behind him, close enough to watch, far enough to avoid frightening the fragile peace. "My aunt's petition has been withdrawn," Shen Mochen said. "The school director resigned." Miss Kiao will face charges if you choose to proceed. If I choose, it is your decision. Lin Yu looked at him. That sounds new for you. It is. The answer was so plain that Lin Yu almost looked away. Instead, he watched the lake, where the wind moved gently over the surface without leaving scars. I don't know if I can forgive you. I know. I don't know if I want An to call you father. I know. I don't even know if I believe you won't change your mind. Shen Mochen's hands remained at his sides. Then don't believe me yet. Lin Yu turned toward him. Shen Mochen's eyes held exhaustion. But not demand. I won't ask for forgiveness as payment for doing what I should have done. I won't ask for trust because blood gives me a place. If Lin An allows me near him one day, it will be because I have earned that day. If you never allow more than that, I will still protect the boundary you draw. For a long time, Lin Yu said nothing. Then Lin An ran back, cheeks flushed from the cold, triumphantly holding up an untouched biscuit because the cat had rejected charity. Dad, Uncle Shen, the cat is very proud. The absurd seriousness of it broke something small and aching in the air. Lin Yu took the biscuit from his hand, brushed dirt from his sleeve, and realized Shen Mochen was watching the movement with a hunger so restrained it looked almost like grief. When they reached the edge of the park, Lin Yu stopped. You can walk us back to the bookstore, he said. Shen Mochen did not move at first, as if he had not understood permission when it came without ceremony. Lin Yu adjusted Lin An's crooked hat. His voice was quiet, but steady, only to the door. And listen carefully. Being a father is not a title you receive because blood proves something. It is a debt paid every day, in ways a child may never notice. Shen Mochen looked at Lin An, then at Lin Yu. I understand, he said. Lin Yu began walking. This time, when Shen Mochen followed, no one ran. The first time Shen Mochen came to pick Lin An up from kindergarten, he arrived 20 minutes early and stood across the street like a man awaiting judgment. He wore a dark wool coat, carried no briefcase, and kept his phone in his pocket even though it vibrated twice. Shen Mochen watched without approaching until Lin Yu appeared. Thin scarf wrapped around his neck, one hand lifting automatically when Lin An ran toward him. Lin An saw Shen Mochen next. His steps slowed. Not from fear exactly, but from the careful caution of a child measuring whether the world had changed again without telling him. Lin Yu followed his gaze. For a moment. The distance between the two adults held all the old things: the hotel corridor, the office desk, the legal notice, the rain at the company gate. Do you want to say hello? Lin Yu asked. Lin An thought about it seriously. Can he walk behind us? Shen Mochen heard. He did not look wounded. That, more than visible pain, made Lin Yu's hand tighten around the child's backpack. Shen Mochen only nodded once. I can. So he walked 3 steps behind them to the bus stop. He did that for 11 school days. On the 12th day, Lin An looked back halfway down the street and said, You can walk beside Dad. The sidewalk is wide enough. The sentence was not forgiveness. Children did not think in such formal terms. It was only permission for one ordinary afternoon to be slightly less lonely than the one before it. Shen Mochen accepted it with the same solemnity he once reserved for billion-yuan contracts. Lin Yu pretended not to notice the way the alpha's fingers curled once at his side, as if he had stopped himself from reaching for something too soon. Spring arrived without ceremony. The city softened first at the edges, rain warmer against windows. Roadside trees showing pale green. Lin Yu returned to Asterion Holdings not as an archive assistant, but as a junior analyst in the internal risk department. The offer had not come from Shen Mochen directly. It came through formal evaluation, with work samples, interviews, and a salary range that made Lin Yu stare at the screen for a long time before accepting. Later, he learned that Shen Mochen had removed himself from the hiring decision entirely. That mattered. Help, when given badly, felt like a hand closing around the throat. Help, when given with restraint, left room for a person to stand. On Lin Yu's first day in the new department, he took the desk near the window, arranged his files, placed one small photograph of Lin An beside the computer, and did not apologize for it. Madame Shen lost her board seat in late April. It happened after Shen Mochen released evidence of internal interference surrounding the suppressed medical report from 6 years ago, the unauthorized school pickup, and several succession maneuvers hidden beneath charitable trusts. He did not send her to prison. Lin Yu understood that this was not mercy born from weakness. It was a boundary drawn with precision. Madame Shen retained wealth, a house, and enough dignity to live outside the company she had tried to protect by turning people into pieces on a board. When she asked to see Lin, and once, Shen Mochen refused before Lin Yu had to. "She may write a letter," he said during a phone call. "You can decide whether to read it. Lin An can decide when he is older whether to answer." Lin Yu stood by the kitchen sink, watching steam rise from a pot of rice. "You don't need my approval for every decision involving her." "Yes," Shen Mochen said. "I do." The answer settled into the small kitchen with a quiet weight. Lin Yu had no reply ready. He turned off the stove, listened to Lin An humming in the living room, and realized that trust did not always arrive as warmth. Sometimes it arrived as a question asked every time, even when someone had the power not to ask. Their life changed in small, inconvenient ways. Shen Mochen learned that Lin An disliked carrots unless they were cut into stars, that he lied badly when sleepy, and that he hid broken crayons because he thought broken things were thrown away. Lin Yu learned that Shen Mochen could negotiate hostile acquisitions without blinking but became helpless before a pediatric vaccine form. When the nurse handed him the clipboard, his eyes moved to Lin Yu. Lin Yu said, "You can sign the emergency contact line, not guardian." "I know." His hand did not tremble when he wrote his name, but he took longer than necessary. On weekends, Shen Mochen cooked with the grim focus of a man confronting an enemy with unclear rules. His first attempt at porridge burned at the bottom. Lin An ate 3 bites, placed his spoon down, and said politely, "It tastes very hard-working." Lin Yu turned away to cough. Shen Mochen looked at the bowl, then at the child. "That bad?" Lin An hesitated. Loyalty and honesty, fighting visibly on his small face. "The rice is brave." For the first time, Lin Yu heard Shen Mochen laugh. It was low, brief, and almost unfamiliar to the room. Lin An's eyes widened as if he had discovered a secret door in a wall. Lin Yu stood at the counter and felt something inside him loosen with a pain close to relief. The past did not disappear because mornings became gentler. There were still days when Lin Yu woke before dawn with the old terror in his mouth, convinced Lin An was beneath a desk waiting for him to whisper instructions. There were still moments when Shen Mochen reached too quickly and Lin Yu's body stepped back before thought could intervene. The first time it happened, shame crossed Lin Yu's face so visibly that Shen Mochen lowered his hand and said nothing for the rest of the walk home. That evening, a message arrived. "I moved too fast. I will remember." Lin Yu stared at it for a long time. Then he typed, "I know." He did know. Not completely, not safely, but enough to keep the door unlocked. By early summer, Lin An had begun leaving drawings in Shen Mochen's office. At first, They were cautious offerings: a cat with proud whiskers, a bowl of rice labelled brave, 3 stick figures standing far apart beneath a square sun. Shen Mochen kept all of them in the top drawer of his desk. The last drawing before the school holiday showed 3 people inside a house. The tallest figure stood slightly to one side, not touching the others, but beneath the same roof. Above it, Lin An had written in uneven letters, "Not hiding." Shen Mochen looked at it for so long that his next meeting had to be delayed. That evening, Lin Yu came to the executive floor after work because Lin An had insisted on delivering a new packet of biscuits to the person whose porridge needed encouragement. Most employees had left. The office was quiet. Lin An ran ahead into the side lounge. Now no longer a room of temporary refuge, but a place with his own small shelf. His books arranged by color in a system no adult fully understood. When Lin Yu stepped inside the main office, he found Shen Mochen sitting on the sofa with Lin An already asleep against his lap. The scene stopped him. Once, this office had been a place of exposure. Once, a coat laid over a child had felt like danger disguised as care. Now Shen Mochen sat very still, one hand hovering near Lin An's back without quite holding him, as if even sleep required permission. The child's cheek was pressed against his shirt. His fingers clutched one corner of the dark fabric with trust. No one was under a desk. No one was hiding. Shen Mochen looked up. He did not speak. He only shifted slightly, leaving space beside him on the sofa. Lin Yu stood there for several breaths. The city beyond the windows glittered with early evening traffic. Lin Yu thought of all the rooms he had survived by making himself smaller. Then he walked over and sat down. Their shoulders did not touch at first. After a while, Shen Mochen said quietly, "I still don't know how to be what he needs." Lin Yu looked at Lin An's sleeping face. "Neither did I." "You did?" "No." His voice was calm, not self-pitying. "I only loved him and kept choosing the next day. That was all I knew how to do." Shen Mochen absorbed the sentence as if it were instruction. "Then I will choose the next day." Lin Yu let his hand rest on the sofa between them. He did not reach further. After a long moment, Shen Mochen placed his hand beside it. Their fingers did not intertwine. Not yet. The distance between them remained small, deliberate, alive. Lin Yu looked at it and thought that perhaps some forms of closeness were not built by crossing distance all at once, but by leaving it visible and choosing not to run. A week later, Lin Yu brought a cardboard box to Shen Mochen's house. He still had his own apartment. That had been his condition. No moving in because it was convenient. No merging lives because blood and guilt made everyone impatient. But Lin An had begun spending Friday evenings there, and the house no longer looked like a showroom untouched by breathing. There were children's slippers near the door, a crooked drawing on the refrigerator, and one small toothbrush in the bathroom cup beside Shen Mochen's. At the bottom of the box lay an old grey blanket, washed thin, the edges softened by years of use. Shen Mochen saw it and went still. He knew without being told. Lin Yu held the blanket for a moment. It smelled faintly of detergent and memory. Once, he had spread it beneath an office desk and told his son not to make a sound. Once, it had been the only home he could provide during working hours. He had hated it, kneaded it, washed it, folded it, carried it through shame and winter and fluorescent light. "Do you want to throw it away?" Shen Mochen asked. Lin Yu shook his head. Some wounds did not deserve to be discarded like trash. They had carried people through what should never have happened. They were proof, not of weakness, but of survival. He opened a drawer in the guest room cabinet and placed the blanket inside. Not hidden, kept. When he turned around, Shen Mochen was standing at the doorway with Lin An in his arms. The child was pretending to be asleep, though one eye opened to check whether the adults were watching. Lin Yu saw it and said nothing. Shen Mochen looked at him. "Stay for dinner." It was an ordinary question. That was why it mattered. Lin Yu walked toward them and adjusted Lin An's crooked collar. His hand brushed Shen Mochen's wrist. And this time, he did not withdraw. "Yes," he said, "but if the rice is brave again, you're eating it yourself." Lin An burst into laughter. Caught pretending. Shen Mochen's mouth curved faintly. And the house, which had once been too quiet for any human heart, filled with a sound that did not ask permission to remain. Outside, evening settled gently over the city. Inside, the drawer stayed closed, holding the old blanket in the dark, not as a secret, not as shame, but as a reminder that a home was not the place where pain had never existed. A home was the place where no one had to hide from it anymore.